probably tell, apart from the big title and all the rest of it, what's more to me than just being another one of the suits.
Yeah.
So I think some of this begins probably more than like 20 years ago. Well, actually longer than that. We'd probably say more like 40 years ago. Because ever since I was a kid, I've always been enamored by robots, space, sci-fi. So how many geeks here in the room? Brilliant. Brilliant. I'm in good company. So ever since I was a kid, I've always enjoyed this technological advantage that you would get from every single movie and experience. And of course that didn't change when I got to university. The only challenge is I'm Indian, so all Indian folks, they want their kids to be doctors. They do.
Medical.
Yeah, that's the medical one. So I made a compromise with my dad. I said, I want to be an astronaut. So yeah, that's true. Not there yet, but goddamn Elon Musk. So what I did was I said, look, how about I do a PhD somewhere? So that got me my ticket to studying physics, which I flunked at. So finally, too much of an Indian card game called Pani, and with no drugs, definitely rock and roll. Literally as a result of that, I went to work. I worked in a company doing actuarial clerical work. And that was a lot of fun because then I decided I think I'll be an actuary. So I went back to university. I still remember this. The guy I was signing up with, I still remember his name, Stephen Jurish at Fitz. He looked at me and he says, in the actuarial curriculum, you're only allowed one filler course. I said, okay. So I wrote physics. So he looked at me and he said, what the hell is this? I said, full disclosure, I failed previously, so I'm one of those guys with dogged examination. I want to finish this. He says, rubbish, man. He takes his pen and changed my career because he wrote computer science inside it. And literally, I studied actuarial science. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot of things, but I stuck with computer science. And inevitably, some people say they got their degree, cum laude. I know you've got plenty of that. And some people at Summa cum laude or whatever. I was one of those guys who got their degree, thank the Lord. And of course, while I was doing my comp science degree, I came across AI. And, childhood dream, again, to be a little bit shattered to some degree when somebody comes to you. I still remember his name, Vincent Corrible. He was from France. He was our lecturer in my honors year. And he says, so learn Lisp. What? Where's all the cool tech? Where's all the voice recognition systems and all the other stuff I see in the movies? Now you got to build that stuff. There's Prolog, there's Lisp, there's knowledge representation. Man, needless to say, I was deflated because I realized the amount of work that would be required in doing this. So I suppose around the time when I graduated was around the 90s. This would probably be in the middle of what was called the second AI winter. And, fast forward a good number of years after that, a career doing a lot of things in information and analytics and so on. Running my own business for a while as well. I had this opportunity to join IBM. One of the reasons why I joined was because of what I'm going to talk to you about today, which is WhatsApp. And, with that, it's been a whirlwind ride, but along the way, we got rid of the winter, but now we're in summer months and everything is summer, everything is hot, off the press, as you can imagine. So that leads me to the discussion points I'm going to have with you today, which is really a subset of what we do inside WhatsApp, relating to intelligent assistants or bots. And hopefully I'm going to leave you with, so if you came here thinking that you're going to learn something about complex mathematics, machine learning, deep learning, you are going to learn absolutely nothing of that. Yeah. Okay. What I am going to take you through is something about what we do in the portfolio. things for you to think about in terms of the very important aspects also in AI, which is user experience. Yeah? How do you engender engagement? So I'm going to start with probably a question. I can tell you what that means to me as of this morning, but what do you think of normally when you see these three letters? So this is a safe place. I'll give you an opportunity to say what you feel. What do you think of when you see those three letters?
IBM.
Yes.
I don't know the IBM logo.
Yes. Well, just
I think of one big machine and current data. That's it.
big machine. Okay. Any other thoughts? Remember, this is a safe place.
Okay.
Personal computer.
Personal computer. Anyone else?
Think about Jeopardy and chess.
Okay. So you're right, but most of the audience thought of this.
Oh yeah.
Hardware. Okay? We've been known for a number of years, and still to some degree, for making really, really good hardware. Okay? And I can tell you that this particular machine, as well worn as it's not mine, when I finally earned enough money to buy one, which was probably around early 2000s, this was back then the most expensive laptop in the world. The IBM ThinkPad was a machine which, if you were like me, were one of those guys, but today I only have Alienware and all the other stuff. Yeah, you know, biggest, baddest, most amount of, large is better. That's the kind of stuff I liked. I think it was about 40,000 rand back in the day. Okay, it's a horrendous sum of money. I mean, you literally have to have absolute price insensitivity to go buy it. Okay, but this is what we were known for, really making good hardware. And then, of course, why not this piece of what's still called tin? Big, heavy tin. This would be our mainframe. Of course, it shrunk quite considerably from what it used to look like back in the day. But yes, this is the kind of stuff that powers, probably 60-70% of the financial services industry around the world. I still remember my university professor telling me back then. I mean, it's obviously laughable by today's standards, but I mean that was 20 years ago. And he said, like it or not, 70% of the world's information is on mainframe. Not anymore. Okay? But this would be the big pieces of iron that we're also well known for. But of course, these days, we're also probably better known for things like this. Now, I'm going to let you chew on that one. Right? We'll come back to it a little bit later. And of course, we're not quite what you expect as well. Okay? Don't let me take off this jacket. And we're doing new things in aspects related to, for example, design thinking and looking at the world through the eyes of the people who use the systems that we create. Okay? And of course, we're also changing the face of healthcare. Okay? And still going very strongly there. And then there's the kind of things we're doing in the hospitality industry. That there is actually one of the Neo robots. And what we have done inside this space, which I'll talk a little bit more on, is building what is called robot concierges. And you might ask yourself, why would the hotel industry, which prides itself on a highly personalized, engaged service, want to build something as synthetic as a robot concierge? And the big thing is, at 4 in the morning, when you can't remember what you did with your keys, and you don't want to really speak to a human being to explain anything, this is a great piece of equipment to kind of get stuff done.
I thought you were going to say that robots were on the right.
Debate. And then, of course, we kind of know quite a bit about the weather these days as well. Because we acquired the weather company maybe about 2 years ago. And then there's blockchain, bringing blockchain to the world. And we're actively involved in that in terms of our collaboration in the Hyperledger family. But of course, most of you came here to talk a little bit with me today about what was ushered in as a result of this, mind-boggling game show. And a little bit of history about it is that, because I love it, so I apologize apologize if I ramble a bit. I did some research to find out, why did they do this? And it turned out that there was a senior IBM researcher who used to visit a restaurant frequently, and he noticed that in this busy restaurant, every time the Jeopardy game show would come onto the screen somewhere around them, everybody would stop their meal and would suddenly pay attention to what's going on in the game show. And he thought for a moment, I wonder if we could play this show where the people will be as engaged with us as they are with this game show. And that's actually what created the whole idea of doing this. And of course you can expect, when they started, they sucked at it. Okay? When they first started trying to build what is today become Watson, they were terrible. And I'll give you some metrics. Some of them, we used football fields full of the best iron and software that we had. And we struggled in the early days. When we were done, we had whittled this down to a pizza box or two and answering a game show like this. So, illustrating the power of high performance computing, which everybody kind of says, well, yeah, I'm sure you did it because, your tin was just very strong. Okay. Almost forgetting, of course, that if you don't have decent algorithms, you're not going to solve problems. Okay. So inside of that as well was also some pretty powerful algorithms. So I'm going to play you a very short clip. I hope that my sound holds out. Just to give you a kind of teaser introduction. Very importantly, this opens up a whole bunch of questions about, what exactly is a cognitive system? Is this another term that we coined, specifically? And how does this relate to AI and so forth? So let me start dealing with the common ones first. Why is it called Watson? Of all the things, why Watson? And it turns out the answer is we did it to actually pay homage to our first two CEOs, Thomas J. Watson Sr. and Jr. Now Sr. brought IBM into existence from the CTR, the register company, okay, around the 1910, 1912, somewhere around there. And of course created IBM, so we owe him that. And what he did was he built at that time, roughly a $700 million company in the early 1900s. And Thomas J. Watson Jr. took us to a $5 billion company. Okay? And of course, as a result of the way that he embraced education and research and so on, by the 1960s we were winning Nobel Prizes. Okay? So some of the things that you may not understand that we do in IBM is we were the first people to create a traffic light, also responsible for the ATM. For those of you who do mathematics and have heard about fractal geometry, well, that was invented inside IBM research as well, Benoit. And of course, a whole bunch of things, and now, of course, what's it? Now, what does it actually mean to say something is cognitive? So, the traditional English definition of cognitive is the ability to think and so on. We talk about cognitive in terms of its ability to interact with humans. So fundamentally, our cognitive systems are designed to be able to interact with humans. Now, how does it relate to AI? Well, specifically, AI is a rather broad field. Cognitive is kind of a subset of that, although interchangeable in some way, but very focused on interaction. Now, by virtue of our ability to understand and reason with purpose, as well as learn and scale, we say that gives you the ability to literally think. Now, I want to be fair. This definition, as powerful as it is, and I'm sure each of you in your individual domains will have seen, that you can get some incredibly useful results by applying yourself to a problem domain. In the same way, we have done something similar. But this by no means tells you that we're going to displace a human being next year, or next week, or anytime soon. And we should probably be quite grateful for that, to be honest. Okay? But that being said, we can still produce some really fantastic results, and it's actually quite useful in our everyday life. Now, the first criticism that comes about with this is, how's this not just analytics? Right? And of course, the first thing that you have to understand is that between what we do in cognitive and what you do in analytics, the one common thread is machine learning. Now, I'm not sure Benjamin has probably left, but one of the interesting things is that machine learning actually sprouted from all the work in AI. So, analytics has, like AI, commonality in terms of machine learning, but also some significant differences. So the first one is, analytics tends to deal with problems that are quite well defined, whereas in cognitive you tend to deal with things that are rather ambiguous. Perfect example of this, natural language processing. Okay, lots of ambiguity, lots of innuendo, and the ability to solve very importantly with context. Okay. Another important differentiator, answer space. The answers in analytics tend to be definitive, whereas you'll find things are more probabilistic inside the AI space with some level of confidence around it. The semantics are often very much known inside analytics. Perfect example, take a structured data source, name, address, seller. Okay? If you're in any one of those columns, you know exactly what to expect, right? Because it's been structured there. And of course the joke is that our world is inherently unstructured. We convert that into structured form so that machines can process it. They process it, they produce answers, and then we convert them all the way back so that we can digest it, right? And of course, when you do that, there's a certain degree of loss in terms of translation. Very importantly, also loss of time. So what you'll see as we talk more around some of the tooling we have is that the tools are designed to operate on the data in their natural form, not necessarily going to some kind of ETL as such. Okay? So determined semantics. So example being, if I say a sentence, John Smith lives on Oak Avenue and earns $50,000 a year, you tell me where's the person, the address, and the salary. Okay? It's far more difficult to determine that unless you have training. Now, the important part is, in terms of what it means to be cognitive, okay? Hands up all of you that know a little bit about regression. Okay, good. Have driven a modern day car. Okay, that's easy. All right. I've seen some calculus and probability. There we go. Then each of you are, to some degree, a very experienced ML user right now. And the reason is, that stuff's ubiquitous. It's in everything that we do around us. From the Google search bar, for some odd reason, there's people who use Bing and Yahoo, I don't know why. From the machine learning algorithms underneath your search bar to the kind of things that you have even today, and I'll pick an example in the car in a moment. And all of these things, matrices, integration, the chain rule, they've all come back. The days when you're sitting in class going, why am I learning this junk? I will never use it in my life. It's back. And of course, these are some of just the basic tool sets involved in what a data scientist needs to know. So let's look at what it means to have a kind of benefit curve, right? If you start with descriptive statistics, the ability to discover information, or look at what's happening right now, Simple example of that would be the fuel indicator on your vehicle. It's telling you at this point in time how much fuel you have. Okay? Now I remember back in the day, sitting in the back of a car with my dad with this little fuel gauge and having to work out, how many kilometers he traveled, and he had this little table, this little lookup table, which was circular, you could spin the dials. And to make predictions as we were driving down to the coast about when we would need to fill up, the approximate range and so on. And wouldn't you know it, as we got more sophisticated, that's one of the things we did inside vehicles. We create predictive statistics to kind of forecast, when will you run out of fuel? Okay, how many kilometers do you have left before you need to top up? Okay, so that's a great invention. And as you get even more sophisticated, you get into prescriptive statistics. Okay, the ability to specify how you would make something happen. Perfect example: if you drive I'll pick on the German cars for a bit. If you drive you have a German car, you have an eco button, which is basically driving your vehicle in its most economic state. So when you floor the accelerator, you don't get the power that you want. It's expected. It's prescribing that I want to save fuel. All right. And of course, another very easy to use example or easy to understand example is using a Google map. That's a prescriptive algorithm. I want to get there in the fastest possible way, shortest possible distance. This prescription. Okay. Now, cognitive, on the other hand, is about interaction. So I suppose the analogy to borrow on here would be the kind of technologies that would go into what enables, for example, a self-driving car. Now, if we take the detour of having a little fun towards what this means in terms of why the sudden interest in bots and all the rest of it, we have to understand something about what this environment looks like, what the landscape is. And for one thing, the traditional aspect of how businesses used to interact with customers would be literally through a contact center. Okay? If you can't send me an email, which I probably won't read, or have difficulty with getting to the volume to be able to read, you can call me in your contact center and I'll try and help. But the truth is, where people are expecting that, the truth is it's probably more like that. Okay? That people have got all this variety of channels and capability to interact with very specific preferences based on their lifestyle, their behavior. So this is making things obviously very, very hard for companies because they have been building that for years and are very good at doing that, well, questionably. But this is the reality. So how do you deal with that? So we talk about what is regarded as cognitive customer engagement. So this is literally the ability to use natural language interactions, including questions and answers, and especially to help in things like, for example, onboarding. The ability to build once and deploy to multiple channels. To detect emotional state. Now, I'm going to come a little bit about this. It's not sentiment. Okay. So I know Benjamin and a lot of you in the room probably have quite a bit of experience with sentiment, but I'm literally going to talk about emotionality. And that's one of the differentiators we have in the IBM portfolio. And of course, a very important part about being able to use cognitive systems is to walk people through standard business processes. Okay? On their own time. At 4 o'clock in the morning when they have insomnia. And of course, we use advanced machine learning, deep learning, and the intention here is to try and engender a truly omni-channel experience. So, how do we do that? Well, for one thing, the entire Watson portfolio is nothing like what it was in the game show of Jeopardy. In fact, the game show of Jeopardy was a very interesting proof point that is no more relevant than the original plane that flew in Kitty Hawk to the jumbo jet you jumped in today when you were gone. Okay? So what we do inside the Watson portfolio is we are made up of 26 services in a SaaS consumption model. Very, very easy to use, RESTful APIs, JSON-oriented type output. These APIs can cost as little as a quarter of a US cent for some of the APIs. The pricing is different based on tiers as well and usage. And what I'm going to talk to you a little bit today is relating to what we call the conversation service. So this service will help you to literally build what will be regarded as chatbots. I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about something called Tone Analyzer. And remember, I promised I mentioned emotionality. Well, this is one of those services. And something we can have a lot of fun with, something called personality insight. So, how does conversations actually work? So it turns out that we don't always understand this, but when we have a conversation with people, we usually have an intent and a goal. Okay? So we call a goal inside conversations an intent. Oftentimes, as we are conversing, there are things that come up as being related to the conversation we're having also. We call that entities. And then, of course, there's the fact that we would like to be able to guide people, so we call that dialogue. So we take the principle of an intent and entities and dialogue, and those are the facilities by which we build conversational bots. Okay? So the tooling is very business-like. You don't need to know a lot about deep learning and machine learning to be able to use it, but you do need to be able to give it enough examples to train it. Now, under the hood, deep learning, natural language processing, exposed via training, which determines intents, entities, and dialogue. Now, how does this actually work? Let's take an example like somebody telling you, I'm frustrated, I haven't been able to log into your online system. Understand what is meant by the intent. I've forgotten my password, I need to get a new password, I can't log onto your site, my login isn't working. All of these things point to the same intent. In other words, there's a number of ways you can say something, but your meaning behind it or intent is usually particular. And in this case, you actually would like your password to be reset. So if we try and understand the customer based on what's on the left-hand side, the intent from speaking that could be password reset. The entities involved would be online system, as in that's giving you some context. The emotional tone in this case would be anger. And I'll show you a little bit about how we get to that idea. And of course, you could have context that's coming from either your CRM system, billing system, or other application system in your environment. And all of those things typically build up to what you can do to create an engagement. Now, as it turns out, there are lots of chatbot capabilities in the market. And everybody concentrates on text, but it turns out there are some cases where text is actually not a good idea. When asked for directions to some place, maybe you should just give them a map. Okay. In other situations where somebody's trying to do something, nothing prevents you from being able to actually integrate with your application. So be thoughtful when you create these systems, and I'll talk a little bit later about some of the things to be kind of mindful of when you're constructing bots. So just to give you something about what our track record is, we've already built conversation systems for a major bank in South Africa, also another media giant in South Africa. We have a public reference in the form of the Royal Bank of Scotland, and of course, a major bank in Brazil that have been using our conversation systems, just to name some of the bigger ones, and of course, relevant in terms of our local geography. Now, the challenge that you have whenever you build a bot is that everybody understands that bots are fantastic and I can do all kinds of amazing things with them. I can wake up in the morning and I can say, I'm going on holiday, forgot to phone the contact center and switch off my DSTV. Couldn't I just, go on to the bot and tell the bot, switch it off, I'll be back in a week's time, bring it back on, and it's all seamless. Or even more powerfully, as I interact with my financial institution, I would like to get a credit card. Oh, by the way, send one to my wife as well. The beauty of bots is that they are fantastic at being able to do all these things, but that's literally down here, at transactional level. Very often, but power is here, but everybody wants to start here. And that's actually where the problem is. Because there's lots of things you should be doing in a foundational sense before you start doing things in a personalized sense, before you can earn the ability to do something in a transactional sense. Because it requires trust to be able to do this. And of course, unfortunately, a lot of people generally start here. And this is not a problem to be exclusively built around just technology. It takes more than that. You've actually got to be considerate of even the user experience and how you're actually engaging with the customer. Culture, okay? How you should be speaking with them. Lots of times I've seen elegant failures in this area where, people would write an entire paragraph. Good morning, sir. It's wonderful. What a wonderful day I'm sure you are having. Yeah. People are like, just get on with it. You're a bot. I know that. So, when I speak to you, I want to be terse, but of course I get irritated if you're actually impersonal with me. But there's a level and there's a line to walk in terms of the personalization. And then comes the crucial part. What happens if I get irritated with the bot? Okay? Or worse, what happens when I start to fiddle with the bot? Like the kind of stupid things people do with Siri. Hey Siri, tell me so. Right? Now, have you thought about those types of interactions? Have you thought about what to do when somebody says, well, go get me a credit card, buy me a car? Rather than doing the usual, sorry sir, don't understand what you mean, please could you say it again? Okay, can you buy me a car? So, these are some of the things you should be thinking about when you're building bots. And of course, the intention behind this is you're building bots in order to reduce effort. And where is all the effort right now? As it turns out, very often inside your contact center. Okay? Your contact center is bearing the brunt of everybody calling. And what do you know about contact center agents in general? Are they experts in insurance? Are they experts in banking? They're not. Okay? Most of the time, the people sitting there were hired because of their interpersonal skills. They weren't hired because they know the third paragraph of the fourth line about your insurance policy sharing. Okay? So with the result, we get irritated. What do you mean you don't know my coverage? What do you mean you don't know the price of and the price I should be paying versus the one what do you mean? So the challenge we have is that agents struggle, and by building bots, you literally have the ability to deflect a certain percentage of what your normal contact agents would handle to a virtual service. Now the big question comes in. What should I put inside the bot? Alright? And to be honest, it's different for different companies. But it starts with the important question. What is the most easily occurring, simple, but most irritating thing that I'm handling? And if you can answer those questions successfully, then you've probably got a use case on your hands for being able to build a bot. Because I can guarantee you, inside every single contact center, you have somebody saying, well, my agents would be a lot more useful and would cost me a lot less money if I didn't have them wasting their time on answering the same questions all the time. Right? So this is the kind of things that you want to be able to build in the early aspects relating to chatbot engagement. And if you do that right, you will actually save money, in some cases generate money, that allows you to reinvest in terms of digital reinvention and reinvest that effort towards really doing something personalized for the customer. Okay? And if you can do that well, then you earn the right to be digitally proactive and doing more sophisticated things such as advanced campaign management, next best offer, and all the rest. But what do you know? Everybody wants to start here. Right? Now, it doesn't mean that you're incapable of starting there. It does mean, however, that there's a progression very often. And even if you want to progress really quickly through these ones, you should really consider the progression. So, what are some of the lessons we've learned? Now, that's our insignia for design thinking, talking to you about the ability to observe, reflect, and make in a loop that goes on until you are happy with what you have. And literally, some of the lessons that we've learned in terms of how bots should be constructed is that we really should make a distinction between things that are business-driven versus things that are technology-driven. Some of the business-driven things, dialogue flow. How do you really want to interact with your customer? Remember, this is an additional channel. Okay? Does it actually dovetail well with the rest of your channel strategy? Or is this something that's running in the corner somewhere? How well does it match up with the strategy you already have with the other channels? Now, there's a reason why I speak that way is, well, think about it. Heaven forbid if the new channel that you created is terrible. Okay? Heaven forbid that it's so good that all the others suck. Okay? So what you're really looking for here is channel consistency. And you get that by understanding how should you engage with your customers. Okay? Some of the biggest mistakes I've seen being done in this space is where people try to synthesize the way they think their customers behave. So in other words, instead of actually engaging with customers to figure out, what are the things that are important to them, how should I engage with them, why should I engage with them, and so on, you go, well, I'm sure that our Department of Technology specialists should be able to figure that out all by themselves. Okay? As long as you have some advanced tooling, you probably get it. The other aspect is intents. From a business perspective, what intents should you be creating? As I said, I gave you a clue around the easiest, most recurring and thing that you want to displace. But as you get on, I'll give you an example. One of our earliest public references is Deakin University. And there's some very interesting results that came out of this, right? So when Deakin University started, they were an early adopter of Watson, and they wanted to really, they're at the forefront of digital innovation. So they really wanted to get to a point where the students would heavily engage well, back then it wasn't called conversations, but essentially our bot capability. And amazingly, none of the first years used it. Okay? So, can you imagine? You come in all tough from home. Yeah, I left home, I'm my own man, I'm my own lady, and you want to speak to mom and dad at the career office rather than the bot. Because it's lonely. Okay? It's my first year, I don't know where everything is. By the second and third year, you've had enough of dealing with human beings, and now it's bot country. Okay? So now you want to do things like, where's the best accommodation? Can I buy a parking ticket, for the day to park on campus, for example? And we grew that system from a modest, 1,000 intents to over 20,000 intents today. So start small, scale quickly. And of course, don't forget the user interface. All right? Nothing is more irritating than reading lots of stick text on a mobile. Okay? Might be great for a big desktop with a web page, but not on a mobile. And then there's the technology aspects. What are you doing about reporting and analytics? What about training data? And certainly the kind of training that you give. So what I'm going to do very briefly now is I'm going to take you through just two of our APIs in our WhatsApp portfolio. I'll show you how, to be honest, all of you can do this yourselves. Well, of course, I forgot that was a trick too. So, now I'm going to... Okay, that worked. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you very quickly to average web page. And the first thing that you will notice is that as IBMers, we obviously use Google too. And if you search for what's in Developer Cloud and go to our site, it will give you access to the Watson portfolio. And what's a lot of fun is if you view all the services, you get a list of all the services we support. And what's even more fun is that we give you a 30-day trial of any of these services. Of course, they are limited in terms of the number of API calls you can do per day, etc. But you should be able to play with any one of these services. You'll see there's conversation, virtual agent, which is actually built on conversations, vision. Of course, some of my colleagues before this have spoken quite a bit on image recognition and so on. So I won't bore you with anything there. But we're going to come down to a moment here with what we do with empathy. So we'll start with Personality Insight. Now, Personality Insight is one of my favorite services. And the reason it's one of my favorites is, number one, it's something that IBM is truly differentiated in the market. Nobody does this. Okay? And if you click on view the demo, so what this service actually does is known as Psycholinguistic Profile. So in other words, the basis of the kind of words you use in terms of how you speak and the way you use them, we can infer something about your personality. Right. Anybody with dating websites should be thinking about this. I'm not that desperate, just for a sale. So effectively, what you could do if you go down in the service, you'll see you can fork some code on GitHub. You can start free on Bluemix. Bluemix is really our platform as a service by which we dispense all of our APIs. Watson just happens to be one portion of our APIs. We have APIs in analytics and a whole bunch of other. In total, Watson constitutes about 26 services. We have over 170 services available in the cloud right now, all available through Bluemix. Now, you can pick on a Twitter handle, Twitter personality. If you're like me, you go for body of text. And if you're also more like me, you click on own text and you plug in your resume or CV and you see what it does. Okay? So I can tell you from personal experience, having done exactly that, when the service came out, I think probably around 2015 it was actually GA, as in generally available. So I plugged in my best version of my resume and CV, and probably about 80 to 85% of what I read I expected, because I wrote my CV that way. And then there was another 15% that I did not expect. So I'd challenge you to see what you get when you stick this in. So let's just for the moment pick on a canned piece of text. In this case, Gandhi. So you'll see there's quite a bit of text. Now the important thing to inform you here is do not try and use Personality Insight on a paragraph or a single sentence and so on, because there's just not enough information to reliably tell you something about the personality. Okay? You need to have enough text, and of course you just punch the Analyze button, and what do you know? The first thing you get from Watson is an understanding of what the confidence level is. So you can see the confidence level is very strong analysis, because there's quite a bit of information involved. You can see the summary: you're shrewd, skeptical, and restrained. Your choices are driven by a desire for discovery. This guy's definitely Indian because he likes musical movies. I don't. And you can see also unlikely to be influenced by social media and product purchases. Absolutely. Not that it was around back then. Right? And if you look at how we did this, you'll actually get the research behind how we can infer this. Okay? But very importantly, we can tell you something about the big 5 elements of a person's personality. Nothing would be complete if we didn't tell you something about their consumer needs. Okay? And of course their values. And if you don't like that, we have JSON for you. And if you don't like that, then we can show you something about what we call a Sunburst chart visualization. Okay? And how's that for authority challenge? 98%. That's something we kind of expect. So now, initially, when you look at this and you get beyond the giggle factor, you start to say, well, what's the possibility? What could I actually do with this? So we built a very, very simple example of just what might be possible. It's not real, but just illustrative. We built an example of what we call an investment advisor. Now, if you think about this, one of the things that Watson does not purport to do, and we won't do it, is it doesn't come along with your industry expertise. You are the experts in your industry. We understand natural language, we understand context, and all the aspects relating to, intelligence, but not in your domain. You actually bring the domain in terms of training capability. Okay? So, for example, if you were to launch this app, imagine that you had a situation where you had clients and representatives. Now, it's clear, as a client, you leave quite a significant digital exhaust with you as a customer. Okay? Emails, blogs, phone calls, quite a bit of information about you available in the ether. Right? What if we use that information to pair you up with perhaps the best representative? Now this is a rather pedestrian example, but it illustrates an important point. In this case, we're trying to say, well, like-minded people should probably attract. Okay? But what if you were building a team of specialists where you valued diversity in a project, for example, and you actually didn't want like-mindedness. You actually wanted people that had enough capability and difference in thought to be able to stimulate innovation, for example. Okay? Because it's been well shown that like-minded people tend to do the worst possible things. So having a team that's diverse actually does that. So this just illustrates what you can do with your industry expertise, but that would be literally, we give you the answer, we don't tell you what to do with it. Okay? Similarly, you might be able to take that personality and match it on the basis of whether you're averse to risk or not, to perhaps some investments or products. Remember, your industry expertise, if you were sitting across the table, would be, this looks like some character who just is very cautious. I know exactly the kind of stock I think he should buy. Okay? What's to stop you from using the information that's available to be able to do that? And I think it's becoming all the rage with what is called Robo Advisors these days. Okay? Yep. Where people are literally saying, well, I can't afford the one, well, it's not quite one-to-one, but let's just say the constrained many-to-one relationship between advisor and customers. Okay? And somewhere in the middle is a sweet spot where I can train a robo-advisor to do all the work for me the way a standard advisor might, in a narrow band as such. Voila, robo-advisors selling investments. And of course, that's just one of the things that you could do with personality. Now, borrowing from that, the sister service with personality is what we call, where is it going? Tone analyzer. Now, where personality tells you something about the person, tone tells you the tone of the message. Now, this is not tone as in what you would hear, but the tone as in what is the emotionality of the message. So if you click on view the demo, you see something quite interesting. You can choose from a number of different use cases. I'm just going to, for now, just pick an email message. Hi team, times are difficult, our sales have been disappointing. This is an email that has been written by a sales leader to a team. And let's see what Watson thinks about the emotionality. So look at this. There's an 88% chance, 61% chance that there's sadness being mentioned in this message. Okay? There's a very analytical style in terms of the tone. At a sentence level, we can tell everything that's relating to analytical, anger, fear, sadness. Well, sadness will show up, but we can actually highlight the different parts. Now, what's the benefit of a service like this? Well, let's think about this. If you have an organization which is inundated by messages, whether that's on email, whether that's on your contact page, who reads it? Who gets a chance to look at it? With a service like this, you can essentially do message triage. You can decide which messages you should actually respond to and how. And if you're not going to automate them, perhaps you should get Bill, because Bill's still around. You should get Bill because he's the most emotionally intelligent personality, and he should be the guy that should be having this really difficult conversation with the person who wrote this message. And of course, I've been known to use this message when my wife sends me emails, and I'm like, I know exactly what she means when she sends me something. So that's what you can do, for example, with tone. Now, here's another use case example. Remember I was talking to you about chatbots? Well, what happens when you get irritated with the chatbot? Now, you can do synthetic things. You can try and look for some keywords inside of it, to try and figure out that somebody is irritated, but that quickly, you fall short of that quite quickly. But if you used a tone analyzer, for example, you can tell if a customer is irate, and you can maybe do something to rescue the engagement, whether that's to pass them over to a live agent, or perhaps find some other intermediary bot that's both engaging and useful, and also, fills the void of retail therapy. So this is a demonstration that we built for one of our customers, North Face. So I don't know how many of you have heard of North Face, the apparel manufacturers. So if you do hiking and so forth, North Face make really, really excellent apparel. So this was built around, okay, so this is not showing up, so let me see if I can fix the display a bit. Here's an example of a situation of you walking into your average sports store and having a conversation with salesperson. Going on some activity, please will you help me select a jacket. So we built a what's in conversations use case around this. So where and when will you be using this jacket? I'm going to go hiking in Kilimanjaro in December. Okay. Are you looking for a men or women's jacket? Women's jacket. Because I know how to shop for my wife. Right. So, just by considering a very simple idea and the ability to process natural language, how about being able to whittle down to an experience like this? Versus an Amazon search bar with 11 zillion options and struggling to get through product code and color. Okay. So this is just one example of how you can use a conversational engine together with a bit of creativity, and of course understanding the product catalog will certainly help to be able to really create an engaged experience with your customer. And of course, you can fiddle around more with this, and you get even more specific down to, do something with down, feather, and you handle wet weather versus dry, and wind, and so on and so on. But wouldn't this be great when you consider the tyranny of choice that we have to deal with, even picking, for example, a cell phone? Okay. Here, 7,000 different options. Which one's for me? I want to have lots of real estate, but I better have good battery power. It also needs to fit in my pocket, and a whole bunch of things. You can certainly use something like this together with analytics, machine learning. Because remember, when you're doing things inside the AI space, you should not be thinking about technology from a monolithic perspective. You should really be looking at how you integrate with a whole bunch of things to be able to get the best outcome and experience. So with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. Any questions, either now or after the break, I'll be happy to take.
I've got some questions. Any questions?
I just noticed that you chose the most expensive jacket.
Yeah. That wasn't planned. There's no shameless product placements here.
The Kilimanjaro is there.
Oh, you mean where does it fit in?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago I almost died on the mountain. So yeah, I began to hike it. So, and it's, now I'm spelling it.
That's good. Any other questions?
Just quickly, you mentioned your biggest system having 20,000 intents. Is that all in one for the same service?
Yes. Sorry.
Workspace.
Not necessarily. So what you'll find is that was actually built on an earlier generation of composition, which was called natural language classifier. And of course, the service has actually changed from where it was built initially to where we are now. So we didn't have workspaces.
Okay. That's cool. Okay, anything else?
Okay.
Yeah.
For this demonstration, did you
of the things you're going to find about how a lot of these problems are solved is that they are very far away from magic. So the traditional things that you do inside technology, integration, the ability to communicate with multiple possible application systems underneath, God forbid, master data management, all the other things that are required for you to be able to get data succinctly, and all the challenges you have doing that in large organizations, because oftentimes there's duplication, so yes, you do need to integrate with back-end systems for this. You do have to consider, of course, that now that you have a bot, you've also got to manage that entire code lifecycle. Okay, so it's doesn't magically look after itself. As you are using a system like this, you typically look at adding intents, because over a period of time, you will, as a result of the learnings, you will either refine some intents, you might drop some altogether. So yes, there's quite a bit of stuff done underneath this. That's more than just smoking mirrors.
Right. I almost recovered from this peppermint, sorry. Dangerous stuff. So another question.
Sure.
I've played quite a bit with Watson. So now insights are pretty good. Tone analyzer as well. So in terms of conversation service, the examples you talked about, you mentioned deep learning and stuff, but do you perhaps know to what extent are you actually using deep learning? Because when I played with it, there's not a lot of, you don't need to give it a lot of examples. Yes. So how does it work? What is it use?
Oh, that's okay. So look, I'll be honest with you, I'd be lying if I got into specifics.
Yeah.
And most of that stuff,
It's probably a combination of things.
Yes.
Because
Very
you
much.
need a lot of examples for deep learning very properly. But yeah.
And the other thing to also be fair about is that the product evolves continuously.
Gotcha.
Because it's a service that's on the cloud. We're not necessarily, we're going through a release cycle. We always laugh. We call this what is called what's in time. So in what's in time, a minute is an hour is a day, and a day is a week. And the reason I say that is because the technology is being refined so often, under the hood.
Yeah,
That
sure.
you don't really get to notice. Hang on a second, we're going to be down now. We're going to do this slightly differently. Connect in another hour.
Yeah.
But, you go through a offering management cycle where new functionality gets added and it gets replicated. Throughout the ecosystem of the data centers.
Yeah.
You don't even know it happened. So I would say that's refined and constantly. And it's hard to tell you any technical specifics, to be honest.
No, that's fine. The other things that because I've engaged with the guys in the US quite a bit, what they also recommend is the Watson Studio, Knowledge Studio. You do have users here, but you have emphasize it here, but because the whole thing around knowledge management is a critical thing. You want to provide them with relevant information. So if you feed documents, you want to see if there's some. I don't know if you use knowledge graphs or stuff like that. For instance, I know with retrieval ranking, you've got Solar and some machine learning and ranking and stuff like that. I've worked quite a bit with that, but it's still tedious to create that. And what they've recommended was Watson Studio, Knowledge Studio. Yeah. So.
Okay, so so since you've already guessed, there's no loss in telling. As it turns out, Watson Knowledge Studio grew out of the very early tooling that we had inside Watson, which was to a large degree rules-based. Okay? So what would happen is we understood language, natural language, but we didn't understand the industry context. So what we had tooling that allowed you, and I think the earlier version of course was called Watson Studio or something like that.
Yeah.
But it came with our Watson Explorer system.
Yeah.
So you could literally, highlight, you could train Watson on industry specifics. This is an accident. This is a car fender, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
But it was very rules-based, it was tedious, it took a long time. What we did is, we literally took the principles of that tooling and we built it with a cloud-based, machine learning oriented. So now, you don't need to give so many examples.
Because you already have some examples.
Yes.
You just, but that's what I thought, because if there's at least some sort of knowledge base, I'm not sure if you're doing that, but then you just give it a little bit more specific examples and you can shape it and we maybe go to the right knowledge, whatever.
Yes. So effectively, one of the things that you do with Knowledge Studio, which is very useful, is that, and the metrics around here boil down to something like, so how much of training do I need and how much of text do I need? So on some of the examples, the people in the know have said, look, you probably need pieces of text around 500 to 600 words, and you need about 1,000 words and about 500 to 600 examples. And between anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks of training, and you probably will spread that with a bunch of people at least. You can probably get a pretty strong model out of it. And what's really good about that is that the way the tooling is designed, you can take the model and you can deploy it directly into what's in natural language understanding, NLU, for example, or discovery service. So the model can actually be detached and brought into, for example, even what's in store. Okay. So you find the Knowledge Studio. Now, there's a certain bunch of people inside the organization that have been this rule-based tool was tedious but really good. This tool is machine learning oriented only, and what happens when the machine learning models are not able to adjust for the training that you're giving? Because then you take that model and you refine it with the rules model. Okay? So there's a certain school of thought that says, it's not that or that, it's actually that and that. So literally the Knowledge Studio, also cloud-based now. So, and I mean, look, for large organizations, $150 per user.
Yes, so that was interesting.
So your pricing model will obviously varies. So for Knowledge Studio, it's per user, and it's unlimited in terms of
storage. I think you're limited about 10 gigs of storage.
Okay, but when you actually utilize the models and stuff,
yes,
you obviously going to pay a subscription fee, or that's, I guess it's different to conversational service when you build the APIs.
Yes,
and stuff.
So here in Knowledge Studio, you pay per seat.
Yeah.
You have a certain amount of storage capacity to house. You have a certain amount of storage capacity to house the documents, for which you apply the training on. And when you're done, you're not calling that service on the API level, but you are taking the model and putting it somewhere else.
Gotcha.
So the API cost will be incurred at the model that your service that you're using. And I think there's, in some cases, depending on what the pricing is, every custom model has an additional cost attached to it, something like that. But you'll find, as I was saying, the one thing I didn't get into, and it's maybe just worth closing the conversation on, is, no pun intended, is that what's in conversations is industry agnostic. So, as I said, we understand natural language, but you bring the industry. So you bring the intent and the training. Okay? Because you do that, the price point is very low. A quarter of a US cent is a very small price to pay for an API, but that illustrates an important.
You use it a lot of times.
Sure.
Yeah.
But it's actually a small price. Now, what we did was we then realized that customers were struggling to build industry-relevant, trained conversation bots. So we came up with something called Virtual Agent. Now,
I saw that.
Right. So Virtual Agent is actually built on conversations. So under the hood, it's actually conversations.
Yes.
But what we do is we do all the training for you. And we created industry context around telco and retail banking. So what does this mean? This means we understand intents such as, what's my phone? When can I get a phone upgrade? Okay. So we do all the training for you. Difference is the price point. The price point now is $2.65 per call. So you do the training, very cheap. We do the training, price point is different, but of course the ability to get off the mark quickly and easily is painful.
Okay, maybe my final question, just quickly. I'm just thinking, IBM Research, and I've dealt with guys in Israel, there's IBM Research everywhere. You also, IBM Research, how do you, there's a lot of, I'm just thinking about state-of-the-art AI and what IBM has done in the past. You talked about the history and all of that. How's IBM thinking about some of the innovations? Obviously, there's a lot of talent being brought into, say, Facebook even, and there's obviously with Google, all about that. Anything on the card from IBM perspective, from innovation perspective, to drive it forward a little bit? I'm thinking about TensorFlow being opened up and all of those kind of things. And I know what you guys are doing is also, you've got this, is it Power AI?
Yes.
That's right. So
I'll tell you something about that. So first important thing is, I was struck by the honesty of the slide saying we haven't produced any papers and we're not in terms of AI and especially
in Africa.
In Africa, publication. So the first thing I wanted to say there is
That's just NEPS.
That's just NEPS. So firstly, we've got 2 research labs here in Africa. The research lab in Kenya and one here based in South Africa, in actually Johannesburg, Bloemfontein, not very far away from here. And we've got we've hired some really talented researchers working locally on local problems. And there's a very interesting, if you go to research.ibm.com, you'll see something about some of the things we're doing. Some of the local researchers are working on problems in astrophysics, working on problems in climate control, air quality, a lot of very things that are very much relevant in Africa.
Relevant problems.
Yes. So that's one. The important aspects to engage with you on where we're going and what we're doing in response to some of the AI tech frameworks. Frameworks is that yes, I suppose the air of wonder is probably a little bit lower since the release of TensorFlow and so on. But what we are doing that's very important is we've teamed up with NVIDIA and we've actually created the Minsky system, which are essentially yes, after Minsky, which is our cognitive infrastructure, our Power AI platform. So this is a platform that includes our best of best Power CPUs together with NVIDIA GPUs, sold as an offering which includes IBM Cafe, TensorFlow, NVIDIA Cafe.
It's called Amazon.
I'm not
sure that
I'm not.
But you've got the important ones.
Yes. So that's literally available, and of course the question is, why do you need it? Because if you think about the fact that a lot of AI capability is available on the cloud right now, then there's some niche stuff on the other extreme. What happens with the stuff in between? What happens if there's something that you want to do for which there isn't something available? Then I guess you can build it yourself. And this is the kind of infrastructure and capability that allows you to do that.
That's right.
So the Power AI systems are our hottest new product. Quite a lot of fun running Linux on Power. So we've embraced open source quite considerably inside of it, and of course, as I said, TensorFlow and the rest running inside there as well. So there's plenty for all the people who want to use things the way they want to use them.
Yeah. Okay.
I think TensorFlow, from a deep learning framework perspective, right? But we know there's limits to deep learning, and there's articles even by Francis Collett, the guy who works at Google, that talks about the limitation of deep learning, future of deep learning. So I'm thinking from a research perspective, there's so much more. So there's always opportunity to create your own thing and breakthrough. IBM was got this legacy in intelligence and stuff, so there's more. TensorFlow is not where it stop. They've got maybe for now, but so I'm just curious if IBM.
So one last thing that I know, which is general enough to talk about, is there's been a lot of excitement recently on generative machine learning as well. And I was looking at some of that very recently, and some of the results it's literally astounding. The fact that people can work with very small data sets to be able to produce. It's actually a dream between the statistician who's always looking for high quality, noiseless data.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's not a lot of it available, so it's so to speak.
Yeah.
And the traditional machine learning data scientists on the other side are saying, just give me a lot of it. I'll figure it out. And this is coming closer towards the statistician's dream on the other side. So quite a bit of fun.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you very much, Kugendran. I think that was awesome. Any further questions from the audience? Okay, so I've got feedback from Circuit Media. Well, you guys mentioned that one of the guys is actually presenting tomorrow as well. I think it's also been, just to quickly wrap up, I think it was an interesting balance. There was so congrats to Circuit Media for getting all the people together, and we're looking forward to tomorrow to see, there will be some interesting talks as well. And so thank you very much for your attendance.